Coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast, the Eagles look a little inconsistent despite being 2-0. Does that matter? Can they still get to 6-0 in their first month and a half looking at their schedule? We're going to get into all that and more. Plus, NJ.com Eagles beat reporter Chris Franklin joins me. This is the Locked On Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This episode of Locked On Eagles is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more right now. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 back in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. I'm Louis DiBiase. Shout out to our everydayers for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day, Monday through Friday. It is a Tuesday edition of the show, and as I mentioned before the intro, so excited to have one of my good friends back on the podcast, my favorite beat reporter in Philadelphia, NJ.com Eagles beat, Chris Franklin. He's going to join me to get into all the ups and downs so far of these first two games that the Eagles won against the New England Patriots and the Minnesota Vikings to start 2-0. It's the first time they've started 2-0 in back-to-back years since 1992 and 1993. So with that being said, the Eagles still are a legitimate contender in the NFL, but it's been an inconsistent first 2 weeks. There's been some up and downs on offense. There's been some injuries. There's a lot of turnover from last year that they're still working out the kinks. So I want to talk to Chris about what's been good about these first two games, what's been bad, what needs correcting, who the replacement's going to be for Avonte Maddox in the slot. Just a report on all these positions from somebody that's up close and personal with the team right now and is traveling every single week, and their entire professional life is about covering the Philadelphia Eagles. So Chris is going to join me in segments 2 and 3. And again, I think you've heard Gino and I, we're not being homers and saying undefeated, made the Super Bowl last year, all is well. Let's ignore all the negatives. Like, there's nothing wrong with this team right now that they need to correct to get back to where they were last year and potentially this time win a Super Bowl. But at the same time, this podcast's theme over the last 2 weeks is the sky is not falling. This team is 2-0. They're finding ways to win despite injuries on defense, despite inconsistencies right now with your new coordinators, specifically your play caller in Brian Johnson, consistently dealing with some different things on offense when it comes to moving parts in the backfield, pass protection, injuries there. The offensive line still not fully in form right now. I think the blitz pickups could be a lot better from the line, from Jalen Hurts, from the running backs. Overall, defenses are throwing a lot more at them. They're playing tougher opponents. And so with all that being said, the fact that they're still 2-0, the fact that they still put up 34 points last week, the fact that they still got a really tough road win against Bill Belichick week 1 shows that they still have championship DNA, right? I mean, this isn't a team that is historically regressing. Are they a team right now that's ready to win a championship? I don't think so. That's why the season is 17 weeks and not 2. But the sky is not falling at all. They're still showing flashes of elite play on both sides. Like, you're still seeing some incredible plays from Jalen Hurts. I mean, that throw to DeVonta Smith last week, the touchdown, or even the touchdown that was called back to A.J. Brown was on another level. The touchdown or the pass that he threw to A.J. Brown 50 yards down the field week 1 against New England was unbelievable, right? The line completely took over in the ground game against Minnesota. DeAndre Swift looked elite. DeVonta Smith looked elite. Jordan Mailata was incredible in pass pro. You look on the defensive side of the football, the defensive line has taken over in both games in the second half to close things out. You're seeing battling from the depth of the second and third levels. Like, you're seeing some bright spots from Zach Cunningham and Nicholas Morrow and, Reed Blankenship 2 weeks ago. The corners still look good. So there's a lot of positives still to take from this football team. And honestly, again, it doesn't feel like the start of the 2022 season with the way these 2 wins have gone. But when you take a look at this schedule, the Eagles, like, again, last year, I mean, they almost had a perfect season, right? I mean, they didn't lose until November. This year, you would think with the way they're playing, like, yeah, they're 2-0, but maybe it's a matter of time if they keep playing like this that they could lose one of these games, which is true. Their schedule isn't like a total cakewalk, but I'm looking at the schedule until that game on Sunday night, October 22nd, against the Miami Dolphins. So they have 4 more matchups, and they're already 2-0, and I'm saying, okay, yeah, like, you play the next 2 games, 2 undefeated teams at 2-0. You play the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and you play the Washington Commanders. Both teams are 2-0, but I think they're probably the two most fraudulent undefeated teams left in the NFL. The Eagles should be heavy favorites next Monday night against Tampa Bay, despite how good Baker Mayfield looks. And then Baker Mayfield light Sam Howell in Washington. Like, Washington's talented. I've been saying that for years. If they just had an okay quarterback, they would be playoff contenders. They have Sam Howell, who looks more than okay right now. They've got a lot of talent on both sides of the ball, but is at home, and the Eagles are a superior football team to Washington in the NFC East. Then they play the Los Angeles Rams. The Rams do look a lot better this year than I think the national consensus would have predicted. But again, the Eagles are a much more talented team than LA. Then they play Zach Wilson and the New York Jets, and Zach Wilson looks like a train wreck. Like, the Jets defense is good, but they're playing Zach Wilson. They should be heavy favorites. Or I should say favorites, maybe not heavy favorites in all 4 games. Like, again, these aren't cakewalks, but honestly, this is a really great opportunity. And honestly, the Eagles should be able to do this, where they get to 6-0 before that Sunday night game against Miami, and then things start to get tougher. Right? I mean, because then, of course, you have your Washington game again, which is another tough opponent on the road who you're going to be playing in a few weeks. Then the gauntlet comes. So it would be huge if you can rack up 6 straight wins and build up a little cushion. I'm not saying then they can afford to lose these other games against these great teams, but then you play Dallas, then you play Kansas City, then Buffalo, then San Francisco, then Dallas again, then Seattle. For a month and a half, you were just going through this gauntlet juggernaut schedule. Even right after that, you play the New York Giants, the Cardinals, and the Giants to finish off the year. So this is a really good opportunity. If the Eagles, like, they've already gotten 2 wins, not playing at 100% on either side of the ball. If you get a lot of these players back from injury, like James Bradbury, Reed Blankenship, Nakobe Dean in a few weeks, if you can get to 6-0, and again, it's tough. Like, these teams are not pushovers. Again, it's hard to do it's hard to win 6 straight games in the NFL, especially 2 years in a row, but it's very, very doable. And again, considering the layout of this schedule, it would be massive for this team to build up that kind of cushion, especially with how good the NFC looks right now, with Detroit and Seattle battling on Sunday, with the way San Francisco and Dallas looks. Our Locked On Podcast Network power rankings, they're 1 and 2 right now. The Eagles we have at number 3. I don't agree with that, but the top 3 teams on our power rankings are in the NFC. You want to battle for that 1 seed. Home field advantage is going to be very important, considering you don't want to go to Dallas or San Francisco in the postseason versus having them come to Philadelphia. So these wins are very, very important. I think the Eagles should and could get to 6-0 on the season. All right, Eagles fans, let's get to our interview with NJ.com Eagles beat reporter Chris Franklin, coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. And guys, today's show is sponsored by Jace Medical. The Jace case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. All it takes to get a Jace case is fill out a simple online form, and in some cases, jump on a quick call with one of our board-certified physicians. Get ongoing care from our physicians on any treatment-related questions. Doctors created, doctors recommended. Don't get caught being unprepared. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected times of crisis. You know, I had this situation with my family member last year in Buffalo, New York, where we had 2 really bad blizzards in November and December, and an older relative of mine needed medication, needed antibiotics, things that the Jace case could provide, and they absolutely did come through. Here's a customer review as well. Frank said, easy as 1, 2, 3 and just in time. I received our package the same day. I got a sinus infection. My doctor was out of town. No appointments for days. Thank goodness it arrived. That's exactly what the Jace case can do. With storms, shortages, pandemics, reliance on China, and supply chain issues, we need to be prepared now more than ever. Save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jace Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using my promo code LOCKEDON at checkout on jacemedical.com. That's jacemedical.com. Guys, today's podcast is also sponsored by FanDuel, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network and the NFL. It's America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $200 back in bonus bets, guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's it. $5 bet. Just bet the anytime rushing touchdown for Jalen Hurts, and boom, $200 back in bonus bets. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action than the NFL season. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL and the Locked On Podcast Network. All right, Eagles fans, welcome back to this Tuesday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Really excited by my next guest, my favorite beat reporter in Philadelphia, the Eagles beat reporter for NJ.com. It's Chris Franklin. You can find him on NJ.com and on Twitter at CFranklinNews. The Eagles are 2-0. Chris is going to give us his insight. Chris, thanks for joining the show again, man, so soon. Really appreciate it.
Hey, no problem, Louie. Always great talking with you, man. It's always fun talking football.
Yeah, for sure. The Eagles are 2-0 right now. First time, I think they've done it in 2 straight years since the 90s. So really impressive. They beat 2 good teams against the New England Patriots and the Minnesota Vikings. But, Chris, at the same time, I think if you told us at the start of the year the Eagles were 2-0, we might say it would look a little different. Some ups and downs on both sides of the ball. Let's start with the positives. What have you seen good from this team through these first 2 wins? Like, what have been the bright spots that have helped them win these games?
Well, I think overall the fact that running game is still so potent that they can still basically check all these other defensive lines and just say, you know what, we're going to go man on man and we're just going to run the ball down your throat. I think that's really a really positive thing that, that you have that in the back of your hand that you can use. DeAndre Swift, after not getting as many touches that first game, seeing him be able to go off the way he did, the patience, that big playability, the ability to make Minnesota. I think he had at least 9 he forced 9 missed tackles or something like that against the Vikings, to see that big playability there. And defensively, I think when you look at your defensive tackles, I mean, Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis, the way they're just getting a push up the middle. And I thought the only thing that was holding Jordan Davis back was his pass rushing ability. You've seen that's improved greatly. I saw that swim move that he used. That was great, but none of that could have been done without Fletcher Cox. And I look at Fletcher Cox as the way that he's mentored these guys, the way that they're the whole group, even Milton Williams, they all hang out. He's being that mentor to them and giving them the wisdom. And you seeing that starting to show up on the field. So those are the main areas I look at right now.
For sure. Yeah, I think, Chris, that's a consistent theme with the Eagles over the years. When they're good, it's most of the time because of their lines, right? The offensive and defensive line. DeAndre Swift definitely got more meat off the bones than Kenneth Gainwell did week 1, but I thought the offensive line took over too. And you're right, I think at both sides in the trenches. Jordan Davis, did you see that in the summer? I think the hype was that he looked more athletic, more in shape than last year. He's healthy, but did you see the pass rush improvements, or has this been kind of a surprise that he has a sack and a half already in 2 weeks?
I saw the quickness. I saw when you saw it compared last year, toward, even though he was battling that foot and everything, but when you saw the quickness that he came back with, he did look lighter, but the ability to jump into that A gap, and then all of a sudden you have to make the center go, whoa, I have to move as a snap. You have to immediately go back because you see him rushing, and then to help out the guard. The fact that he's able to draw those 2 people more than what he's done in the past, I think that's been really encouraging, and that all started back in the summer, getting that quickness.
Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter right now both ranked in the top 4 for PFF's defensive tackle grading. Carter leads the NFL in pressures, but you're right, Chris, I like that you mentioned Fletcher Cox because it almost seems like these young kids around him have rejuvenated him, or I don't know, lit a fire under him to make sure he can hang with, because it's not just Carter and Davis. Milton Williams is having a good start to the year too, but I don't know, is this the best we've seen of Fletcher Cox since 2018? I mean, I think he looks great.
I thought he, not to steal Draggles, I thought he reached his final form back last year. He had the 7 sacks, and all of a sudden you see this now. It's like, wow, where did this come from? I don't know if it's one of those things where he feels like, he's looking at the end toward the end of his career, and he's looking like, hey, I want to leave my legacy is good. I want to leave an even better impression than he's already had, which is tough to do when you think about it. But I wonder that. I mean, he's out there playing walk ball with these guys. I was like, that's different generation stuff. We were hanging out with them, but you see he's feeding off that energy they've been providing.
No, for sure. So, Chris, again, I think the Eagles, they're 2-0 right now. I think they're looking good in a lot of areas, like both sides of the line. The run game, for sure. DeVonta Smith looks incredible. Jalen Hurts still making some elite plays, but at the same time, I think there's stuff they could work on for the offense. Why do you think there has been some inconsistencies, especially with the passing game? I know I'm sure there's a lot of variables to it, but what are kind of the main reasons it's been a little more up and down this year so far?
It looks like what the Eagles have done the last couple of years with trying not to allow those explosive plays. The other teams are like, we're just going to give the same formula right back to you, because you see them. They're going cover 3, cover 4, not letting them get beat like AJ Brown or DeVonta Smith, which he somehow found a way to do it the other day. But they're trying to limit that. So not only that, in between the numbers, they're really starting to try to limit what they're giving to Hurts as well too. So that impacts the RPO game when he comes off of it. They're taking that away. You can't in the run part of it. So you're looking at it, it's really tough to do that. I mean, they're also playing a lot of zone because you want, especially when you have a dual threat like Jalen Hurts, you want to keep your eyes on him, see where he's going, because you don't want all of a sudden play a man-to-man. Next thing you know, wait, he's behind me 20. Oh, okay, got to accept that. So I think that's one of the reasons why, and I think it's a matter of Hurts has missed a couple of throws as well too, like
Sure.
especially that New England Patriots game. There's Dallas Goedert was streaking down the sideline a couple of times. He could have had him, but he missed it. So it's still a work in progress. It's still early on, but it's encouraging to see they've been able to make some of these plays.
New play caller too with Brian Johnson as the offensive coordinator. But yeah, Chris, you're right. It's almost like they're saying you can have the run game, which is crazy considering how good the Eagles are at it. But it's the opposite of what 2021 was, where they were daring Hurts to throw. And now I guess it's a testament to how far he's come that they're saying you're not beating us pulling the football in these RPOs. We'll give it to the running back, and you're not beating us deep. And honestly, I guess it's a good strategy because that really was the Eagles' bread and butter last year was the deep ball and the RPO game.
Yeah, and that comes with the work that Hurts did last year, and it's continuing this one. He's put a lot of touch, especially in training camp. You saw the touch he's putting on those deep ball, especially along the sideline. So you try to do the deep ball that way too. You try to back shoulder fade. He's been able to get in a good position for them to catch too. So it puts those defensive backs in a tough position. So the defensive coordinator's like, nah, we will try to take as much to the equation as we can.
But Chris, I will say at the same time, though, eventually when the Eagles ran it down Minnesota's throats, Minnesota did come back down the line, start to blitz more, and that's what opened up that touchdown to DeVonta Smith. So I think there is a patience approach here, just taking what the defense gives you when you have all this talent. I think I noticed this with Kansas City a few years ago. You want it when you have the talent, you want to force the ball, but sometimes when you can't, you kind of had to do death by 1,000 paper cuts, right? It almost feels like they didn't want that early in the Minnesota game, and then they adjusted and just took it. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is sponsored by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. I used to be lame, a standard fantasy guy in my 112-team league, and then Prize Picks came through, and it's been so much fun to spice it up. Here's how it works. You select 2 or more players, and all you got to do, pick more or less than their projected stats for that week, and then place your entry. It's really simple to play. I can make my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. This week I went with Odell Beckham for less than 50 yards. I hit that. Josh Allen for more than 2 passing touchdowns. I nailed that one as well. Prize Picks offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value. They now offer Apple Pay as well for quick and easy deposits into your account this football season. It's been an incredible, fun run with Prize Picks the last few years. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use our code LockedOnNFL for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the code LockedOnNFL. They're going to match your first deposit up to $100. Go take the over on Philadelphia this week against Tampa Bay. Jalen Hurts, DeVonta Smith, A.J. Brown, right? We know they're going to force feed him after he was mad on the sidelines. Dallas Goedert, whoever it is, I think the over is the right way to go with Prize Picks. Again, prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL. Use the promo code LockedOnNFL to get them to match your first deposit up to $100. We thank Prize Picks for sponsoring the Locked On Eagles podcast today.
Especially when you have these younger quarterbacks, like, oh, I need to make a play. I need to make a play. I want to make a highlight, and you go that way too. But I think that's a good thing as well too. When you look at teams wanting to blitz you more, if I'm a quarterback, I'm like, okay, yeah, blitz me as much as you want.
Sure.
It may be tough to see where you're going, but I know there's going to be an open man somewhere. So okay, I'll go ahead and find it that way. So
right.
I think that just shows the impact that Hurts had. The fact that he was able to develop as a passer put them in this position to be able to do that.
What about the defensive side of the ball? I mean, through 2 weeks, what have your thoughts been with Sean Desai, the job he's done? I think they've had to come deal with a lot more adversity when it comes to like injuries, right? So what do you think the defense has done over the first 2 weeks, good and bad?
I think I'd say when you look at it is rough with those injuries. I mean, you lose your Swiss Army knife in Avonte Maddox. When you look at the way he does off the corner, I think that really hurts you in that aspect. Not having Bradbury back, but thankfully he's going to be back out of concussion protocol. You think is for his upcoming Monday game, and then I look at when they have Reed, same thing. With those ribs, I think he'll be back as well too. So I think the injury did hamper him a little bit. I would like to see them play a little bit more consistently in the second and third levels when it comes to stopping them, especially on third down. Third down teams, the Vikings were, even though it wasn't as good as the Patriots, but they were getting gashed on third downs as well too, prolonging those drives. And I would love to see some more stuff out of the linebackers as well too. I like the way when they were flowing the ball and stopping the runs when those defensive tackles are clearing space for them, they're doing that. So, and it's tough without Nakobe Dean. I mean, he was your trendsetter. He was the one that lined them up. So I think the biggest thing for them is they just have to get cohesiveness and stay away from the entry plug as long as you can, because you've seen that this defensive line front seven can get pressure when they need it.
That's the thing. I mean, you mentioned earlier in the show, I mean, how elite this interior looks, and Josh Sweat on the edge looks incredible too. But Chris, I feel like this pass rush hasn't even really seen its full upside because I don't know. What do you think? Hassan Riddick, Nolan Smith, Brandon Graham. It almost feels like those guys haven't even really gotten going yet because of injuries and with limited snap counts. So I think the edge rushers really haven't even gotten going yet.
And especially when, you think a lot of teams will look like they try to slide the line somewhat to stop Reddick because of the way he's doing. And that thumb, is even though he's skipped back and he's fine, he's playing there, defensive linemen have to use their hands a lot. It's a violent thing. And I think he's still working his way back. I think this rest is going to help him out when it comes in terms of that. And I think it's a matter of just with the line sliding to that way to try to protect them. Now, the thing is going to be is when you start to have Jalen Carter out there more and more, getting more reps, and you start using more 5-man instead of the 4, you use a 5-man. You can't slide the line as much because Carter's going to get up the middle. Can't slide this way. Are you going to give up to Reddick? Can't do it that way. So it puts teams in that. I think it's a matter of they just need the rest, and they make these adjustments over this time for having this mini bye after playing Thursday.
Chris, I want to go back to, you mentioned DeVonta Maddox, who had the surgery on the torn pec, probably going to be out for the season. So I feel like the Eagles are a deep roster, but this was one position I thought if Maddox, not that he's like a Jenga piece, you can't win a championship without him, but it was one of those spots where they don't have a clear and obvious backup anymore, right? With Zach McPherson going down in the summer, it's like it could be Mario Goodrich, Bradbury cross-trained in the summer. They could try to sign somebody. What do you think the long-term fix is for this year in the slot?
I think you're looking at a matchup. I think you're looking at a matchup approach. I mean, if it's for most base of the stuff, it probably would be Goodrich. But when you have you play against teams like the Cowboys, when you play against the 49ers, where you have 3 receivers that are legitimate and who can make big plays, I think that's when you move Bradbury into the slot more and you bring Job off the bench to use that. Goodrich, I think he looked a little hesitant to begin with. I mean, any reserve coming in there is like, okay, I'm playing on national TV. Okay, I'm in the middle. What's going on here? And then he got more comfortable as the game went along. And I think that's as time goes along, knowing that he's the nickel guy now, I think he's going to be fine. But when you get to some of those tougher matchups, maybe they start to think of putting Job in because Job, well, barring that, I thought at first it was like, wow, he's doing really good. And then they started attacking him. It was like, okay, he needs a little bit. But I think over time, it's both of those guys' experience. He'll be all right. They'll be all right.
All right, Chris, one last question for you here before I let you go. Who through 2 weeks do you think has been the most underrated bright spot? Maybe on either side of the ball.
Ooh, that's a good one. I think PFF, if you go by PFF, is Jordan Mailata. But I think when you look at that's tough. I'm thinking you got me, man. You got me. I'm like that. I'll stick with Mailata because I'll stick with Mailata because when you look at Lane Johnson and the job he's done over time with the sack streak and everything else, a lot of attention goes to him, rightfully, deservedly so. But when you look at what Mailata can do against space, when you get, especially these Belichick teams, when they bring these exotic looks off the edges, with the Vikings, with Brian Flores, a Belichick disciple, bringing in a lot of those exotic pressures, and the way he and Landon Dickerson have done communicating it, and Mailata himself getting out on the edge and blocking that, I think that's been really key. And if he plays this one up, I think he's seriously looking at a Pro Bowl type year. Because imagine you might have legitimately 4 guys, maybe 5 if Cam picks it up. You might legitimately have 4 guys that could be going to the Pro Bowl from this offensive line.
I think the PFF grade was he had the highest grade of any lineman in the last 10 years or something on Thursday night?
It's like 2010 or something like that. Yeah, it's crazy. 16, 10, something like that. But it's crazy the way he was able to play. And the scary thing is he's not. I don't think he's personally in his prime yet. I think he's still getting some knowledge and stuff like this too. So when he really hits his prime, it's crazy what this is.
Exciting, man. No, you're right though, and he does kind of go under the radar because Jason Kelce, of course, one of the most famous athletes in the world right now too, with his podcast and everything, and Lane Johnson gets the hype. So yeah, I'm with you. Mailata has looked great through 2 weeks. Chris Franklin, NJ.com Eagles beat reporter, joining me right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. Great stuff as always. You can follow him on Twitter at @CFranklinNews. Chris, man, appreciate it, and hopefully we'll have you on soon, man.
No worries. I appreciate it, Louis. Thanks again, man.
Thanks.